In 2023, we've seen a lot of stinkers being released with terrible performance, and I really don't think that we've seen the last of it yet, unfortunately. So to lighten up your mood, I want to showcase 5 games that had a not so great launch, but turned out to be pretty good games after a while. Elder Scrolls Online is an MMORPG that launched in 2014 to lukewarm reviews. It's currently at a Metascore of 71 and suffered both from lack of content, but also from being an Elder Scrolls game. While it should be a plus to be connected to such a beloved franchise, a lot of people expected the game to be sort of Skyrim Online, and that was just not the case. I also saw a lot of people complaining about Bethesda wasting time on this, when they should have been making Elder Scrolls 6, not realizing that it's not even the same studios that made ESO, but that will require people to think before typing online, and we just don't do that here. One of the most common complaints from players was a lack of endgame, which is crucial to have in an MMORPG if you want people to keep playing your game. In general, releasing an MMORPG is tough because it requires a somewhat large player base at all time to even be functional, otherwise it might as well be a single player game. Other than that, the game had a few bugs at launch and some underwhelming graphics, and in the review from PC Games N, the reviewer said ZeniMax have a lot of work ahead of them to turn the Elder Scrolls Online around. I guess the developers at ZeniMax Studios took that as a challenge, and only a year later they released Elder Scrolls Online Tamriel Unlimited, which removed the mandatory monthly sub and made it more feasible for people to buy into. This seemed to spark things at the studio, who continued to work on the game, and they've since added a large variety of stuff. Among the things they've added are an UI overhaul, player housing, an armory system that allows for full customization of your character, battlegrounds, transmog system, next-gen graphics, a lot of new skill lines, a companion system, the Warden and Necromancer classes, and a ton of new content in one of their many expansions. It also introduced a monthly premium service that allowed people to subscribe and get access to all of the expansions released to the game. I think that's a pretty good system because you can play the game without it, but when you subscribe you just get all the expansions instead of having to buy them one by one. You could also just buy them one by one if you wanted to, but there's so many now that it's probably more feasible just to go with the monthly sub while you want to have access to them. I personally used to play this game a lot before I got hooked on World of Warcraft, and I think it's a very fun game, so if you haven't given it a shot yet, consider it. No Man's Sky was a game released in August of 2016 that promised a lot but delivered too little. If you haven't heard of it, the short version is that it is a space simulator that got put on blast for promising a bunch of things that it couldn't possibly deliver on launch, partly due to this partnership with Sony. It earned a Metacritic score of 61, and after the initial launch, the developers seemingly went AWOL, with the entire internet thinking that they just took their money and ran. But they didn't. Instead, they took their time to figure out how to best fix this mess, and then they went on what is undoubtedly one of the best runs of updates that the game has ever seen. First, it added the Foundation update in December of 2016 that allowed players to set a home planet, construct bases, teleport between space stations, and added some new game modes. Then the Pathfinder update came in March of 2017, where players could share a blueprint of their bases. They added a new vehicle called the Exocraft and Steam Workshop support as well. Shortly after that, Atlas Rises was released, which added a ton of new story and a cooperative game mode that, while not allowing them to directly play together, they could at least see each other, which foreshadowed the major update that released a year later on the 24th of July 2018, No Man's Sky Next. The next update added a full multiplayer experience with co-op, exploration and combat, and everything promised at launch. And since then, they've added a ton of content that only expands on the experience of playing No Man's Sky. While I don't condone lying to consumers, you have to admire the tenacity that Hello Games had to continue to improve the game. I mean, so many people were trash talking them even when they released new updates, but they persevered, and No Man's Sky is now a great game that delivered on everything it promised and so much more. I can definitely recommend it to anyone who finds that type of game just a slight bit interesting. Sea of Thieves is an action-adventure game where you take the role of a pirate that voyages beyond the vast sea in an open multiplayer world. It was released in 2018 to a Metascore of 67, with the main complaints being the lack of content, repetitive quests, and just being kind of empty. The developers soon got to work and has since added a ton of content to keep their player base happy, and they've seen a lot of growth in their player base for the past 5 years. Of the notable additions to the game, there are Tall Tales, a story-driven campaign that offered up to 30 hours of gameplay, the Arena, which is a competitive PvP game mode, the Megalodon, which is a massive shark that at all time lurks in the ocean and could attack your ship.
Why do I hear boss music?
Where's the Kraken?
Oh!
The Skeleton Ships, which gives the players PvE ship combat, the Devil's Roar, which is a whole new region Fishing, fog, cargo runs, pets, cooking, a bunch of loot and loads of new weapons, and also fire. Yeah, fire. Just like man's first invention, Sea of Thieves added fire to give the combat a whole new complex dimension. So the game is currently in a great state, however it's probably best experienced when played with friends, so you also have to expect that some of the community can be toxic, which could ruin the experience a bit, but here's to hoping they'll add a PvE mode at some point. Fortnite is a game that you all know, but Fortnite was announced in 2011 and released in 2017, and I don't think I need to explain much about this game. And then again, because Fortnite was never supposed to be the success story it is today. I remember being very hyped for Fortnite releasing because the game initially was a zombie game going under the title Fortnite Save the World. However, when it was released it was immensely disappointing. It was like a worse version of Orcs Must Die and no one really gave it much thought. That was until they released the Battle Royale game mode in 2017. And they got a staggering 10 million players during the first 2 weeks, and since then the game has just taken off. With constant updates, battle pass seasons, map changes, and just a lot of investment being put back in the game, there's no doubt that Fortnite will last for a long while. I don't really play the game myself, but I can only admire how Epic Games took the money from Fortnite and invested it back in the community. In 2018, they released Fortnite Creative, which allowed players to create their own maps and game modes, which has since then shown a ton of creative projects and game modes, much like it used to be with Counter-Strike and Garry's Mod on the Source engine. With similarities to games like Roblox and, well, Garry's Mod, there's really no telling what Fortnite Creative will produce in the future. Most recently, a mod made by a fan to imitate the old Call of Duty experience was allegedly taken down by Activision. Diablo 3 is a game that's been through a lot. It released in May of 2012 and despite receiving a great score of 88 on Metacritic, because it's a Blizzard game, the community were not that impressed. First of all, it had a few bugs and server issues that would literally prevent people from playing because of the always online requirement. Then it had the infamous auction house that was created to counter the black market that existed in Diablo 2, where people would go around official Blizzard systems to sell items and gold for real life money. Blizzard decided to have an auction house where people could buy and sell items with real world money and gold, which on paper sounds like the solution to the problem, but it eventually just caused a big uproar in the community, because it meant that the richest players, and by that I mean IRL, not in-game rich, would be able to get all the best gear, while everyone else were left to fend for themselves. And people accused Blizzard of tuning the drops so you'd only saw great loot, very rarely, in order to create a scarcity on the market that would mean higher prices for items. And whether or not this was true, we know that Blizzard has tuned the looting system during the various updates of the game. And the experience ruined the entire online experience for many people, and Blizzard eventually had to take the auction house down. And they also revamped the entire game through the Reaper of Souls expansion, where they added a new playable class, increased the level limit, and added transmogrification and a new loot system dubbed as Loot 2.0. That meant that there would be less drops but better quality in the drops, and they would usually fit your characters more than in the previous system. They continued to develop the game by introducing the Necromancer class in the DLC and add new endgame content, and also introduce seasons which would keep the game fresh and going. While it's not as popular as it used to be, I still think it holds up to this day, and it's a great way to get your ARPG fix before Diablo 4 is released next month. That was it for me this time. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing, it really helps a lot. Let me know in the comments which games you think has changed the most since release and deserves to be in this video or maybe a future video. Bye bye.